Good evening, everyone. My name is Jerry Ilar, the Public Events and Engagement Coordinator on the Communications and Engagement team. I want to say thank you for joining us today for our session on helping our students respond to trauma exposure as we return to school. We know this time has been very difficult for everyone with COVID, and also everyone's leading difficult lives. And so we want to make sure that we're offering as many tools and resources for you all as families, parents, students, to start the year positively and prepared as we start the new school year. And so as we introduce supports from the school mental health, supports from the mental supports team, I do want to start off with a couple of housekeeping things that we want to make sure that you are able to engage properly throughout the session. So before we get into some of the housekeeping, we do have some upcoming parent university workshops. So today we are finishing off the August month with helping our children respond to trauma as we return to learning. And then September, we have 5 sessions learning how to navigate the IEP process this year, or the Individualized Education Program. On September 3rd, we have high school grading, graduation supports, experience restorative practices with your family, what will attendance look like, and then English learning family guide to partnering with PK teachers in Spanish. And so check out the bit.ly link, bit.ly/DCPS Parent U RSVP to register for the sessions. We also have interpretation for Spanish, and I believe that's been posted in the announcements, but it's bit.ly interpretation 827 if you need Spanish interpretation, and that's going to be provided in a Zoom breakout session. So go ahead, click on that link if you need Spanish interpretation. But if you need subtitles provided in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, and French, go ahead, click on the gear button in the bottom right and to click on captions or subtitles, and then go ahead, click on the subtitles that you need in order to engage with the session. And then a quick intro on how to use the Q&A box or the announcements page. So throughout the session, we will have a couple of our staff members posting announcements, making sure that you are utilizing all of the resources that are provided in the links throughout the session. But if you have a question or comment, please go ahead, use that Q&A box and publish that by pressing the ask button. But if you want to ask something anonymously, go ahead, press ask anonymously for you to interact with all of us. We will have about 4 or 5 people trying to answer as many questions as possible, but knowing the amount of people who are attending today's session, we may not be able to get to every question. We are also using a couple of tools that may require a computer. And so once we get to a couple of the slides, one of our presenters will walk you through how to use that. And so just be careful if you're using a smartphone or a tablet, it may not be as in sync with using the tools in order to engage. And then we do want to overview the DCPS core values that we abide by and follow, and make sure that we're reaching all of our strategic priorities and making sure that our students are returning to schools feeling loved, challenged, and prepared. And so here are a list of our 6 core values just to ground us in the work that we're doing throughout the school year. And that leads us into our community agreement. So as we know, we may be having tough conversations with ourselves, with our family members, with students, with our teachers. But even within the session, we want to assume best intentions. We want to go hard on ideas and not on people, and accept non-closure. And the school mental health team will help us reach the community agreement and make sure that everyone is able to follow that and participate as positively as we can through this session, because we know dealing with trauma is very difficult for everyone, but we know that mental health matters, and in order for us to be successful, we need to deal with the mental health piece in all of our lives. So with that, I do want to introduce the Chancellor for a quick welcome and opening.
Thank you, Jerry, for the introduction and covering our logistics for this evening. So excited that many of our parents and guardians and families have made time for this important session this evening. As I think about all of our parent university sessions, this is one that is definitely at the top of the list where we are now as relates to being responsive to the needs of our students and families. Please know it is not lost on us that more so than ever, our students and families are experiencing trauma. And it is critical that we have trauma responsive practices embedded in our day and our service as we start the 2021 school year. It's also not lost on me that, and our staff as well, that many of our students and families need to connect and reconnect with our students as we're entering uncharted territory, starting the school year in a virtual posture. There are 3 guiding principles that we have that have shaped our plans for the start of the school year that is rooted in the feedback that you provided to us. And that is, 1, we must continue to ensure that we maximize learning time, whether that's at home or school. Secondly, we need to continue to operate from a rich lens of equity, understanding and acknowledging that there's various needs across the district and we must allocate services and resources accordingly. And then finally, continue to work towards robust health and safety protocols while students are learning at home and also in preparation for hybrid or in-person learning. Above those is our need to be trauma responsive, knowing that the well-being of our students socially, emotionally, and their mental health is so vital to the teaching and the learning process. And so it's my pleasure to introduce our experts on the DCPS team that will be facilitating and guiding tonight's discussion. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Douglas Gotel, who is the Director for Trauma Responsive School Initiatives for DCPS and also helps guide our work with School Mental Health Project AWARE. Also on the team tonight, facilitating and guiding discussion is Kenya Coleman, who is a Senior Director for School Mental Health for DCPS, and then Nigel Jackson, who is our Director for School Mental Health. Please join me in welcoming this team tonight, who has been preparing for this session and is thrilled to help guide you through our actions and thoughts and also respond to your questions accordingly.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us today. We are excited to share how this team, the School Mental Health team, has worked with schools to build their capacity to provide healing-centered treatments and educational practices. We will also share how DCPS has been intentional about helping our students effectively cope with trauma and the ongoing adjustment to our new way of living while responding to 2 pandemics. Our goals for today's presentation are to orient families to the DCPS Trauma Responsive Schools model, to describe expectations for schools, and last but certainly not least, to advise families on how to access mental health supports for students.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I want us to ground ourselves today in our opening activity around the concept of relationship and resilience. And we're going to do that with an interactive whiteboard called Padlet. But I want us to first start off with just remembering and thinking back, going back into our life experience, and remember some meaning experiences for us. And as you go through the rest of the session this evening, I want you to keep in mind what these experiences felt like and what supports you needed to be successful. So in the announcement, you are going to see a link that will take you to an interactive whiteboard that you can post on. Now, the whiteboard, admittedly, it works best on a laptop or desktop. And if you are joining by smartphone or tablet, you can add your responses in the Q&A if that works better for you. So I want you to go ahead and click on that link. And there are instructions at the top of the whiteboard. And what I'd like for you to do is pick a response to either one of these questions or these prompts. And the first one is, you see here, describe your most rewarding relationship with a teacher and why you value that relationship, or describe a time that you overcame a challenge and how you did that. So on the Padlet, you double click anywhere onto that whiteboard and it will bring up a square that has title in it, and you can write over the title to type in your response. So pick one or two of those, and the Padlet will get pretty full. And if you can scroll down using the scroll bar on the right side of your screen if you need to find another space to write your response. But let's take a moment to do that. Think back. Most rewarding relationship with the teacher, why you value that relationship in one or two sentences. And in one or two sentences, describe something that you overcame, a challenge that you overcame, and how you did it in one or two sentences. Let's take one moment to do that. And I'll call out a few of the responses that we see. I see a response about a drama teacher, Miss White. She believed in you, and that felt special to you. Teachers came to visit someone's home in 4th grade, and that made you feel really comfortable in starting in an unfamiliar environment. I see lots of experiences with teachers. An English teacher and a 6th grade teacher who said not to believe the label that the school gave me. She helped me overcome learning gaps, and ultimately you were able to excel. An English teacher who pointed out your creativity. So wonderful, fantastic experiences that are rooted here in relationships that sparked something in people, in everyone here. Fantastic experiences. So I want us to hold on to that this evening as we go through this presentation, because relationships and resilience, they're themes that you will notice throughout this evening. So hold on to those and think back on those when you hear those words this evening. Thank you for participating in that. All right. So why focus on trauma responsive practices? If we define trauma in the most basic definition, trauma is the body's experience of too much, too fast, that overwhelms our ability to cope or to protect ourselves. Now, we know from research that multiple adverse experiences or trauma in childhood without the buffering of caring and consistent relationships with caregivers or adults and other adults, it can negatively impact and alter a child's social, emotional, neurological, immune, and hormonal systems. And we also know by research that the brain is our most adaptable organ. It can change. It changes with conditioning from the interactions that we have with our environment and the interactions that we have with other people. That's you and that's me. Knowing this, we can make and we can enforce policies to promote conditions for healing students and those who have experienced tremendous setback and adversity. We can make policies that can be healing within the 4 corners of our classrooms. Now, in this case, for now, we can do that in the 4 corners of our screens. And my colleague.
Sorry. The prefix in the word pandemic is pan, meaning all and of everything, and involving all members of a group. So to answer the question, why are we focusing on trauma responsive practices? It's because the coronavirus has affected all and everyone and has involved all members of the group. In this case, that group being the human family. And as if the international pandemic was not enough, we are simultaneously dealing with ongoing racial violence. Both of these ills have been acutely distressing for many. COVID-19 has literally changed how we live from day to day. News anchors deliver the news from their homes. Parents have had to become math teachers and IT professionals right in their very own living rooms. My kitchen has become the student lunchroom. My children want to hang out with their friends, and it has forced some very difficult conversations for us as parents. On the one hand, we want to say absolutely not because it's physically unsafe. But on the other hand, we know they need social interaction with friends to be emotionally balanced. All of this can easily lead to lots of uncertainty, and that can make this experience very distressing, anxiety-filled, and perhaps even traumatic. We know that many of you have lost loved ones to COVID-19. And as if that wasn't enough, many folks weren't able to visit those loved ones in the hospital. At the same time, we have watched the killing of Breonna Taylor in Louisville, the fatal choking of George Floyd by Officer Derek Chauvin, and the shooting of Jacob Blake on Sunday night 7 times in his back in front of his children. And that's just from March till now. Perhaps the quarantine limited our distraction, so we had to deal with it in a different way than we had to in times past. Overall, our families, health, social reality, and every life domain you can think of have been subjected to these emotional challenges and trauma, and therefore requires our schools to focus even more on trauma responsive practices to best support our students.
So all of this, these 2 pandemics that Nigel just described, all are happening at once. And it's traumatic for certain. And at DCPS, we will continue to work to prepare schools, to support schools, to create conditions for learning, to help students effectively cope with all that has happened and continues to happen. The new normal is trauma responsive schools. Every adult and every school has been directed to address trauma in all of its forms. This is and must remain our priority.
So as we reflected on significant relationships and our own resilience in our opening activity, I want to share some other considerations and some framing around this dialogue about trauma responsive schools. And Dr. Pamela Cantor and her colleagues at Turnaround for Children, which is one of our partners, she shares that the path to learning is a calm brain. And relationships are the active ingredient in any environment. And when we focus on relationships, healthy, positive relationships, those relationships in turn boost the hormone oxytocin. Now that's the heart hormone. That's the love hormone. When we hug someone we haven't seen in a long time, that's the feeling that happens. That is through the production of that particular hormone, and it also is the hormone of trust. And when we have an abundance of oxytocin, in our lives through our interactions with others that activates the centers for learning in our brains, in both children and adults. So supportive and trusting relationships, that's the antidote to stress. Routines are something that sometimes we have control over. And our brains are prediction machines, and our brains like order and structure and knowing what's coming next. I surely do. And when our brains also appreciate and work best when our environments are orderly and they're physically and both physically and emotionally orderly and predictable. And in those conditions, the brain is in a much better place to learn. And then resilience, that's one of the most important tasks that we have for ourselves and for our children. And resiliency is something that we build like a muscle. And it starts with knowing the strengths that we already have. The power is already within us. And we also get resilience from our life experiences, where building the skills and mindsets that we possess. And we use resilience to help manage our emotions, to manage our reactions and our behaviors. And if we focus on routines, relationships, resilience, that's how we can create conditions for learning in our schools.
It is worth noting that being trauma responsive is something that is not new at DCPS. We have been trauma informed for some time and have been working towards becoming a trauma responsive school district for the last decade. It started with investments in school mental health staffing in 2010. Then we introduced trauma-focused evidence-based treatments in 2011 and have continued so to this day. We collaborated with Turnaround for Children in 2016 to infuse the science of learning and development into our schools. The TRS Planning Committee convened in 2018 and in 2020 launched the DCPS Trauma Responsive Schools model. This past spring, we administered a DCPS Learning from Home survey where parents were asked, how concerned are you about your child's social or emotional well-being during this period of learning from home during quarantine? 60% of parents expressed some concern over things like social isolation, abrupt separation, anxiety, the ability to see sick family members, and safety around the virus, among others. In that same survey, parents were asked, in what areas do you need extra support? The options were mental and emotional health, food, employment, shelter, healthcare, and other support. Parents ranked food and employment opportunities a close second and third, respectively, but ranked mental and emotional health first by a landslide. In fact, parents surveyed indicated a desire for extra mental health support over 1.5 times more than they did for food and employment, and almost 6 times more than they did for healthcare. These results show the significance of our school mental health providers in the daily functioning of our families, particularly during the time of coronavirus. We are going to revisit the Learning from Home survey this evening. I'd like you to use the chat feature and answer the following question. In what areas would you and your family like the most support at this time? The options are mental health, food, shelter, healthcare, job, and other needs. I'm going to repeat the question. In what areas would you and your family like the most support at this time? Mental health, food, shelter, healthcare, job, and other needs. I'm going to give you a minute to place your answer in the chat. Thank you for those who have answered the survey question. I know that at times I personally have felt the weight of all that is going on around me, as I'm sure many of you have. In addition to the national and international things going on, it has also been an adjustment even here within my own house. There's a lot of pressure to keep the children occupied so they don't succumb to the phones and social media, all the while trying to keep up at my job so I can perform well for my job responsibilities. I've often wondered if it is even natural to be 6 inches from my children 24/7, 365. On a more serious note, I've also been able to really look at the relationships within my family. And if I'm being honest, they aren't always the way I'd like them to be. I've identified where there's room for improvement and repair. I've spoken with my friends about this. Some have shared with me that their house is 100% perfect all the time, in harmony, 24/7. While others have shared many of the same sense of pressure, frustration, and a whole host of other challenging emotions.
So I saw that in the Q&A that some people did mention mental health as one of the needs, and certainly during this pandemic, mental wellness it's been an issue. Whether it's been cabin fever, disconnection from loved ones in the physical sense, anxiety about job security, or managing your children's needs while attending to work tasks, as Nigel explained about his own experience. But being a trauma responsive school district in essence means looking at every aspect of our programming, environment, language, and values, and involving all staff in understanding and creating better ways of serving students and families who have experienced trauma. So the framework that DCPS has, that we have launched this year, a culmination of much of the work that we've done over the last decade, as Mr. Jackson talked about. It's a framework for how we do school. And the aim for this model is to create conditions for learning that acknowledge and address the impact of trauma on student success. And how we address that is through 4 core components of this model, and you see them here: through family and community partnership, safe and supportive environments, through early intervention, and healing-centered treatment and educational practices. And these components and the practices within them These are expected at all schools. In the next slide, you see, although there are a number of practices that we have outlined in this model, we consider relationships, routines, and resilience, and narrowed our focus for this school year as we reopen in this unprecedented year. We've narrowed our focus down to 5 non-negotiable healing center practices that every school in this district must implement. And not only this year, but beyond. And they are, you see them here, that we focus on relational trust, building relational trust with every student, and doing that by spending dedicated time to build those relationships, that every child, every student is greeted with positive and affirming language, not only just in the classroom, but in this virtual space that we're in, that we include opportunities for staff wellness, which has been a somewhat overlooked area, but we'll talk a little bit more about that and why focusing on staff wellness is so important in being a trauma responsive school. We also want to ensure that every school has a space and has opportunities for students to practice emotional regulation or calming strategies when they are dealing with stress, and modeling that. And then finally, for routines, making sure that we are modeling and enforcing school-wide behavioral expectations for students and adults. And this summer, we have spent a great deal of time and resource with school leaders and staff on tooling on a number of strategies that align with these practices that schools are going to implement this year. And let's talk about those. So what does it look like in the schools? So every school was required to assess their implementation of those 5 non-negotiable practices and develop a plan for specific strategies that they're going to use to strengthen those areas. And some of those strategies are definitely going to be used in the virtual space, and some certainly in the physical space when we do return to schools. And it's important to note that these strategies that we're going to go over, they're not limited to just children who have experienced adverse experiences. They are fundamental social and emotional learning strategies for students and adults that build resilience. And as we go through these strategies, we'll also highlight some that you certainly can implement at home.
The first non-negotiable that we'd like to highlight this evening is every student is greeted with positive and affirmative language daily and with each classroom transition. This is a great example of something that you can also do at home. For example, when your student works diligently to complete a task, praise them for their specific efforts instead of offering a general good job.
Hi, Nigel, you're still on mute.
Sorry about that. The next non-negotiable states that every teacher spends dedicated time with their classroom or homeroom to build relational trust. Schools are building time into their virtual schedule for teacher, staff, and student connections through virtual events, scheduled check-in time, and open forums for connecting and problem solving. Some of the ways they are doing this is using 2 by 10, They're using banking time, which is when you schedule one-on-one time, 1 to 3 times a week based on need. It's used for informal connection and social support, where the focus isn't on teaching, allowing the student to lead the content of the time. This is a particularly useful strategy at home for students who act out for attention, or if there's like a rivalry between siblings, like I have between mine. Another strategy is the use of circle time and to incorporate student interests into instruction. The next non-negotiable is every school provides opportunities and designated space to practice emotional regulation. As we mentioned earlier, the path to learning is a calm brain, and that settling the nervous system must take first for the learning center of the brain to work properly. At home, schedule brain breaks and have your child to use movement intentionally. 10-minute fitness video you can also utilize a mediation app like Calm, or you can just breathe to relax.
Our fourth non-negotiable behavior is every school teaches, models, and reinforces school-wide behavior expectations for students and adults. This is also something that can be adapted to the home setting. For example, you can display visual reminders of behavioral expectations while learning from home and model these expectations for your learner. You can also notice and name when your student demonstrates any of your behavioral expectations. Restorative conversations are a structured type of conversation used to process an incident of wrongdoing or conflict to make meaning of harm caused by those involved, an impact that it has on others. It encourages empathy, accountability, expression of feelings and thoughts, and problem solving.
The final non-negotiable practice is staff wellness. Now, we know teachers get fatigued and burned out, and I know that for sure that you, as well as parents and caregivers, get fatigued and overwhelmed too as you're managing it all. And when we don't deal with our stress well, we become reflexive. And that can cause us to make mistakes with ourselves. It can cause us to make mistakes at work and the people that we care about, and with our kids. Self-care is less about escaping the stress of our lives and going on a vacation for a few days if we can get away for a few days. It's less about that, but it's more about managing our body and mind's response to stressors and setting healthy and realistic boundaries. And focusing on staff wellness, it has a downstream effect in the classroom, and focusing on wellness for you is as well has a downstream effect at home. And when we commit ourselves to regular exercise, mindful breathing, reducing our sugar intake, and other self-care activities, what we essentially do is that we open up our nervous system to be better listeners, to be more empathetic and more patient with others. And these are the qualities in relationships, and someone mentioned that in the Q&A. These are developmental relationships that we have. And what I mean by developmental relationships with children, this is for parents as well as with teachers. There is a transfer of skills and knowledge in a developmental relationship, but there has to be trust. And these qualities of being a good listener, being empathetic, being patient, that's part of the glue in relationships, and it fuels a healthy relationship in healthy development. Fuels healthy development in our children, and it offsets the adversity that children face. So putting wellness activities on the to-do list, your to-do list, it's a non-negotiable for all of us, and we're putting a particular focus on that with our teachers this year.
In addition to championing healing-centered treatments and educational practices, school mental health providers, social workers, and school psychologists will continue to offer trauma-focused, evidence-based treatments to students at school. We have interventions for students of every age. For elementary school students, we have bounce back and child-centered play therapy, grief and trauma intervention for children. And for middle and high school students, we have Sparks, CBITS, and several other programs that are available to students. This year, we will also conduct trauma-focused assessments that will aid school-based teams with understanding student needs and enable teams to respond appropriately to trauma. We will also be preparing students to support their peers through our first round of students trained in youth mental health first aid. In addition to the work of the school mental health team, the social and emotional learning team, or SEL team, will continue to offer technical support around establishing strong Tier 1 restorative practices, and will also offer a series of adult SEL this year. We believe that every DC public school will be responsive to the needs of trauma that our students have been exposed to. The 5 non-negotiable behaviors are the foundation for this work, and we will continue to build upon this work in years to come. We're excited to share that we've made it easier to access these services. This year, we're introducing a universal referral process that will allow students to access all mental health supports in schools using one form. The forms are available to you in the Parent University folder and are also available on a link in this particular presentation. If you are interested in your student receiving support, simply submit the form to your school's school behavior health coordinator. The school mental health team will review the form and link your student to the best clinician to meet your student's needs. And the school behavior health coordinator will reach out to you within 10 school days to let you know who will be supporting your student throughout the year. Naturally, I'm certain that you are attempting to determine when do you ask for mental health support. Under what circumstances should you refer a student? I want to take you back to our Parent University training that we held in April entitled Helping Your Child Manage Stress During Challenging Times. In that presentation, we talked in depth about some of the signs and symptoms of stress and anxiety. If you have not had an opportunity to view that particular recording, I suggest that you go back and take a look at it. There's great information there, but I'll try to summarize most of what we discussed now. So some of the signs of distress in students can more easily be summed up by saying simply a change in behavior. You may find that your student may become more negative, unable to articulate hope. You may find that your student will become irritable, changes in eating habits, either eating far more than they normally do or not being hungry at all. There may be changes in sleeping patterns. Again, sleeping a lot or not being able to sleep at all. Fatigue, sadness, all of these are signs of distress. And if your student is demonstrating any of these signs or symptoms, I welcome you to seek the support of a school mental health provider. To access these supports, you can click on the bit.ly to gain access to our referral forms. The first form is a form for students to self-refer. The second form is a link for you or someone else to refer your student. You can get access to that information here on the screen. You can go to dcps.dc.gov and get access to the forms on the School Mental Health Team webpage. And I am excited to share that the School Mental Health Team now has an Instagram page, and you can access our referral forms there as well. In addition to the supports offered in schools by the School Mental Health Team, DBH also has several supports that are available to families. They have a Wellness Wednesday event that they're offering virtually every Wednesday beginning September 2nd from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. They also offer individualized consultation and support to families who have a need. They also work with several community-based organizations that you can access by contacting their Access Helpline, which is 1-888-793-4357 or 1-888-7-WE-HELP. You are certainly welcome to contact the School Mental Health Team and or our Senior Deputy Chief, Dr. Deetra Bryant-Mallory. Our contact information is listed on the screen.
Awesome. Thank you, Nigel, Kenya, and Douglas. We are actually going to have a couple of minutes to answer some questions that were in the chat box. So once you're ready, I'm going to read a couple of the questions for you. And whoever is able to answer the questions the best that they can, I'll turn it over to you. But with the first question we have, with regards to relationships, can you be more specific? How are we building relationships when we cannot see people or nurture the relations as we might want to? All right.
I can take that, Jerry. So it's a very good question. And the key for building relationships and affirming relationships is shared activities. So it's a very important question, and I'm glad somebody asked it, because the virtual reality does really challenge our ability to have that physical contact on a daily basis. But we do have supports available to us, such as video conferencing and just regular phone calls, where we can share activities, we can problem solve, we can handle a project or a task together. Really, how it's done is important, but it's the sharing of what needs to be done that builds the relationship.
Awesome. Thank you, Nigel. The second question, I'm worried that school won't feel real for my child, and I want to make sure he or they take it seriously. How do I build a sense of urgency without scaring them? I'll turn it back to you.
I can take that one.
Perfect.
Well, I think that the key is the conversations that you are having now. And going back to our framework on relationships, routines, and resilience, and this is where the realm of routines is most important. So I'm not sure what age your child is, but the conversations now in understanding what the schedule is. That school is real. You are still going to receive a grade, and that participation is mandatory. Signing on is not an option. Making sure that you have that schedule posted, having something visual, which is also what happens in the classroom that has to create some expectations about how each day will go. And depending on the relationship you have with your child, sometimes it can also be helpful to be and to help be in the frame of mind for work is to still dress as if you are going to work, or in this case, going to school. So if you're school in the uniform, those are things that you can and your child can work on, agree on that we're going to work now, or it's time for school, and be dressed as if you're going, and depending on what your space is, being sure that you create a space that looks like work. If it's your kitchen table, making sure that the space is clear. There is the computer is there, and the television is off during the learning time. And so those are the things, just in terms of setting up your physical space and creating some routines so that it feels like a clear cutoff between leisure time and this is school time.
Thank you, Douglas. I think we have time for 3 more questions. So Kenya, I know you did answer a lot of questions about resources across the district as well as within our schools. But this specific question, who do I talk to about the specific types of trauma responsive strategies my child's school is using? And how do I know if they are right for my child?
Thanks, Jerry. So as Douglas shared earlier in the presentation, each school has completed a trauma responsive schools action plan, which calls out exactly what the strategies will be for the school to implement the 5 non-negotiables. So that information is available. It is written. You can get in contact with your school leader. You can get in contact with a member of the school mental health team, and we will be more than happy to share that information with you. In terms of how do you know if it's right for your student? The 5 non-negotiable practices are practices that we have called out because they are evidence-based to support that they support students who have not necessarily experienced complicated trauma, but they are supportive strategies that can certainly help students to reach their best potential, for lack of better words. So all of the strategies, the 5 non-negotiables that we have called are evidence-based strategies that support students at a very basic level. And then if your student needs additional support, we also have evidence-based treatments and interventions that we provide either in a group setting or individual setting. So no matter what your student's level of need is, we do have an evidence-based strategy to support your student.
Awesome. Thank you, Kenya. I think this might be for you as well. Okay. Do you recommend talking to the child first to the teacher before filling out the referral form?
You can. That will be up to the comfort level of the teacher. However, if you have comfort level of the parent. However, if you feel like you have a clinical concern about your student, I would recommend first speaking with the school behavior health coordinator if you are curious as to whether or not this, the behavior that you are concerned about, if it is a clinical need or not. You can certainly speak to the school behavior health coordinator, who will be like the lead clinician. But I cannot say enough that no matter what your student's level of need is, we have something in place to support your student. So even if it is a mild concern and you feel like your student needs support with that concern, then it's enough to raise it to the team to make sure that your student is supported around his or their specific need.
Can I add to that, Jerry?
Yep.
Sometimes we see situations for parents who you as a parent might think that your child can really benefit from some support, but I know sometimes parents don't want to contact the school because they're afraid the school will tell the child, hey, your parent called and said you need some mental health support. So parents are sometimes reluctant to bring that to the school's attention because they believe that it'll disrupt things with their relationship with their child. So I want to share with the parents that are out there tonight that if you want mental health services, emotional supportive services for your child, you can reach out to us and we will engage that child in a way that really feels supportive to the child without outing you and disrupting any of the relationship you have with your child. Those supports are available for you to access and they'll be handled sensitively and with responsibility.
Thank you, Nigel and Kenya. We have two more questions with the non-negotiables, sort of related. So what is a 2x10? I believe that was stated in one of the non-negotiables. And then could you please give an example of a restorative conversation? So I'm not sure who wants to take which part, or if someone can answer both pieces.
I'll take the 2x10. It's another relationship building strategy. And it's one that we do recommend when there is a strained relationship or that a relationship needs some intervention between teacher and student. And it is really, it's not based on anything other than creating space for the child to not to be led by the adult. It's really for the child to lead, and it's called 2x10 because you're spending 2 minutes intentionally for 10 consecutive days with the student for the sole purpose of just doing things together and letting the child lead what the content of that time is. And this is a strategy that really works well. We tend to do it more with elementary school students, and the other one, banking time, is where you schedule some time with a young person for that same purpose of just getting to know each other, learning from each other to build trust, because that's the fabric before learning can happen.
Thank you, Douglas. I'm going to turn it over to someone who can chat about an example of a restorative conversation.
Yeah, and a restorative conversation basically gives voice to the hurt that a student may have experienced. And so this gives you an opportunity to stop and pause, acknowledge the hurt or the harm that was caused, maybe intentionally or unintentionally, to give voice to what your particular student is feeling, and to work together to identify solutions, right? So it's just an opportunity to stop and pause and to recognize what your student is sitting with at that particular time. So you're simply giving voice to your child's experience.
Thank you so much, Kenya. And I believe that's all the questions, unless if Nigel or Kenya or Douglas, you want to end off with any other important notes. Awesome. Thank you. So Nigel, Kenya, and Douglas, thank you again for leading this conversation. And really, parents, you are in good hands with this team. They know a lot about the work that needs to happen for our students' mental health, and they are trying to do as much as they can to make sure that our students are healthy going into the new school year. So definitely reach out to this team throughout the year, the beginning of the year, and they will put you in good supports to make sure that our kids, our students for DCPS are healthy going into the new school year. And so as we close out the session, we do have a couple of more parent university sessions that will lead into September 17th. The most up-to-date one is September 1st, which is going over the individualized education program process this year. And to look at all the remaining 5, go to bit.ly/DCPS parent U RSVP. And then to check out past Reopen Strong sessions of Parent University, go to bit.ly/parent U Reopen Strong. And we have about 5 sessions on there. And then there are also other playlists that you can check out for this past spring's parent university sessions, especially the ones that this team led back in the spring. And then just to wrap it up, if you are looking for additional resources, go to dcpsreopenstrong.com. That will also list all of our PowerPoint decks, YouTube videos for Parent University, and then additional information about Reopen Strong for DCPS. And then for more information about mental health, go to bit.ly/DCPS Mental Health 2020. And then to help plan for our future Parent University sessions, or to let us know how we did today or past sessions, visit bit.ly/ParentUEval19 for a quick survey. And then for additional resources or questions, you can reach out to our team. That's Natalie, Taylor, and myself for parentu@k12.dc.gov. And just want to say thank you again for attending today's session. And we wish you the best of luck as we start school opening next week, Monday. And if you need any additional resources, to reach out to both of our teams, whether it's parentu@k12.dc.gov or the school mental health team, and we will put you in good hands and give you all the resources that you need to feel successful in your child's success. So thank you.